John, you have a draft profile for us. And, if I'm the resident, West Coast guy, the guy who loves the former Pac 12 and now Big 12 guys, that sort of thing, you have an affinity for a certain region and a certain school as well you should. It is your alma mater. So you have a player that you want to share with us that, local guy, but also a big position in need for the Bengals coming into this offseason.
There may not be a more local guy in this here draft class. Is Luke Kandra, guard out of Elder High School in the west side of Cincinnati, went to play college at Louisville to start. And Louisville's head coach at the time was Scott Satterfield. Scott Satterfield became the head coach at the University of Cincinnati. And the best thing that he's done in these 2 years, aside from the best thing that he's done was bring Luke Kandra to UC as a transfer player from Louisville, because 3-star recruit out of high school, one of the best players in the city, had offers from Boston College and Indiana, went to Louisville, played about half a year in his second year, but transferred to UC to be a starter, and it's worked out tremendously, because I think in this draft class, there's not a better combination of run blocking prowess with stability and pass protection. And he's not going to be drafted in the early rounds. He's not going to be like a top 75 or 100 pick because of some things. But Anthony, I think if you look at the tape, there's not a lot of more cleaner players at this position than Luke Kandra. This is just about a minute of some plays all at right guard. But the things that stand out with him: phenomenal foot speed, the ability to get out into space to make second level blocks, and the grip strength he has.
Nice.
Right?
Yeah.
Excuse me. He locks onto guys. And once he has you in his grasp, there is no letting go. You are stuck there. And that, combined with, I think, the core strength he has. Yeah, like it's a lot of fun watching him not just go up into the second level, but just displace guys in a phone booth. And it's very telling when it also looks very easy. And how he moves and how he displaces guys, it's very simple. It doesn't look like he's exerting too much force in the process, because there's that natural athleticism, there's that natural power to his game. And the one maybe minor drawback with him is that he's got short arms. He's got 32.5-inch arms. He doesn't have a long wingspan, and I think teams may knock him for that. It may be why he falls into like the middle of the draft, in the middle of the pack, and maybe it's lost in the shuffle. But how do you compensate for that? How do you overcome that? And I think when he times his punches correctly, and
sorry, go ahead. Can you rewind that one again real quick? I don't want to interrupt you. There was a couple of plays ago where he does the nice pass off the defender and then goes and finds, I think it was maybe, this one right here. No, same team. If you can go back to that maybe, but there was also one in the Senior Bowl where you see him pass it off. Yeah. See how, yeah. I mean, that's beautiful. And then there's one coming up here in the Senior Bowl too, but that's beautiful stuff right there. And that's stuff that has plagued the Bengals, being able to pass off defenders correctly and pick up another. But I didn't mean to interrupt you, man. You were talking about hand placement and punch. Go ahead.
No, yeah, like I was almost losing my voice there, so thank you for the pause. No, like I think again, it's so much of evaluation is looking at what guys may not have, right? And I don't think he has necessarily the ideal size and measurables that teams would look at. Oh, he's a ball of clay that I can mold him into myself. But how does he overcome that? And I think with his quickness out of his stance, the way that he can create space in pass protection, and he can get out into space, both in zone and gap scheme blocking, that is a good way for him to maximize the length that he does have with his arms, and how and his placement with where his hands are when he locks onto you. I think all that is very sound and solid, and he's obviously been extremely well coached in his 5 years in college. He only played 4, but he was in there for 5 years. I think all of that adds up to someone who you can plop in day one in a competition to be a starter, and I think he would still impress any coach that he would go to. And I think for the Bengals, you're talking about a team that's probably not going to draft a guard in the first couple of rounds. I think with the prioritization of defense, maybe if if they really fall in love with someone, maybe that's the case. But I mean, traditionally, like you're talking about a team that looks at the middle rounds for this position, someone who not only has the starting experience at right guard, has played a little bit of left guard as well, but is scheme versatile. Again, I think reach blocks aren't a problem. Pulling out space isn't the problem. Extremely strong hands. I think can just win in the phone booth, what you need in the AFC North. All of that in a 4th-round pick, and a guy who grew up in Cincinnati, who went to UC, who lived here his whole life, aside from 2 years at Louisville. I just think that if you want to talk about just pure fits for the Bengals in this draft, the stars are aligning, I think, for them to take a chance on a guy like Kandra and to have him compete for a starting job, because one of the jobs is going to go to a free agent. I think we can all agree at this point that's probably the route that they're going to go. But I don't think they're going to sign 2 guys in free agency. I think it's going to come down to a rookie competing with maybe Volson or maybe Cody Ford or maybe a low-level free agent, right? But I think if you give Kandra a fair shot in that battle, I think there's a really good chance that he could win it, because I don't think there's a lot of things that he can't do.
So, any chance, because you know what the Bengals like out of offensive linemen, and this may or may not change with the coaching change here, but the old versatility gene, could he play both guard spots if needed? You mentioned right guard, and I think that's pretty much primarily where he's been. Is there an opportunity that he could play either guard spot in a pinch? Probably not center unless there was an absolute emergency situation there that's needed. But do you see that being a possibility that also would maybe intrigue the Bengals?
Yeah, I think if you're Luke Kandra, you have to be ready to play either left or right guard. He played right guard mostly in college. I want to say he was a left guard in high school, but I have to double check that. He may even repped at center just a couple of times, just in a pinch. But he wasn't at the Senior Bowl. He was at the Hula Bowl, which is a much lesser known college all-star game in Florida. Like even before the Shrine in the Senior Bowl, I thought it was ridiculous that he was snubbed from either of the more well-known all-star games, but he wasn't the snub at the Combine, which I think is going to be really big for him. Not only to verify how long his arms are, and if that's a deal breaker for some teams, could potentially the Bengals. We don't know, particularly Scott Peters' the new offensive line coach's preference for that in that particular measurement, but I think it's going to be big to see what that arm length is confirmed, and specifically his short area quickness. Like that's so indicative of future success for interior offensive linemen, no matter what position that you are. But yeah, like he's going to have to talk about playing either side of the center, and if you're the Bengals, at this point, you don't know which guard spot is going to be that competition. You could sign a veteran left guard or a right guard, right? So I think, yeah, the safe plays for Kandra to probably play right guard, but if you had to have him play left guard, I think he could do it as well.
That you talk about, some of the detriments that would cause him to potentially fall to early to maybe mid day 4. I mean, there was a guy that a lot of us really liked coming into last year's class. The Bengals thankfully ended up getting him in Matt Lee, who is a 7th-round pick, projected to probably go earlier than that, but size, et cetera, were kind of an issue or a perceived issue. But not only in preseason, but he was kind of extra offensive lineman at times in the Bengals lineups this year, and he's a guy that probably, maybe not this year, but probably maybe a year or 2 down the road, looks like a capable NFL starter at center. And this sounds not that he's necessarily a project, Kandra, but it sounds like this is a guy, whether he is going to come in and compete right away for a spot, but a year or 2 down the line could be a very nice starter for a team. Maybe not Pro Bowl, et cetera, but probably a guy that's a steady presence. And by the way, that is all the Bengals need. I would love to have them have a stud Pro Bowl guy and multiple of them on their offensive line, but they need steadiness. They don't need these wild pendulum swings of productivity or lack thereof.
Yeah, and it would just be nice, I think, for once to just have a Clint Bowling situation develop. Like Clint Bowling was a 4th-round pick in that now legendary 2011 draft class for when they drafted AJ and Andy in the first 2 rounds. But Clint Bowling was a 4th-round pick who became a starter in year 2 and just held down left guard for like 7-8 years following that. And he was never of concern. He was never necessarily a great player. He wasn't like an Andrew Weaver type player, but he was just solid. He could just get the job done, and he would rarely make mistakes. And that's kind of along the lines of what I see Kandra being. Like, not the same exact type of body type, But I also think it was interesting how in over 2,000 snaps at both UC and Louisville, only 2 career penalties. Like his hands were never in precarious spots. He was very rarely called for holding, for false start, or hands to the face, or anything along those lines. Like his tape is amongst the cleanest that I've seen so far in this draft class. At really any position, he just gets the job done no matter what the competition is. So those players exist outside of the first few rounds. The Bengals don't have to draft offensive linemen all the time with premium picks. Like the goal should be to find players like Kandra to exercise some value here, so that you can spend other premium positions on spend other premium picks, on other positions that need that type of talent. So I think players like Kandra are what the Bengals need to identify in order to build this roster out in a smart way.
So I'm gonna extrapolate a little bit on this. Just by the way, on the UC website, he is listed at 6'4", 323. So that's a big dude, right? I mean, that's a stout dude. But there are many, many things here. If you want to go back to, especially the early Zach Taylor era and the traits they look for, especially in some of these rookies. And there's a lot of boxes checked here, not only for on-field play, but otherwise. On field, you're talking about, a guy who's an established starter. He was a Sports Illustrated this last year, 2024 alone. Sports Illustrated second team All-American, College Football Network second team All-American, All Big 12 first team, All Big 12 2023 All Big 12 first team from the Associated Press, All Big 12 second team from the coaches in 2023. Walter Camp All-America second team in 2023. And then here you go also, John, just from the other intangibles / leadership / smarts, all that stuff that I think Zach Taylor really hones in on. 2024 CSC Academic All-District, right? And then you look at, aside from all those other accolades, a guy who graduated with his MBA and, maybe I'm grasping at straws here, but it's noted in his bio that he got married at his time in at UC, maybe pointing to a maturity, a maturity standpoint that, again, that creates that solid locker room culture. I'm not saying marriage one way or the other, but I mean, you got to be a pretty mature kid if you're in college getting married, I would think. So maybe these are some of the things, aside from the on-field stuff, the on-field accolades awards, that Zach Taylor and company look at saying, this is a guy we got to have in this locker room.
Yeah, team captain as well. So I think just another bullet point for the leadership. And I think just being from Cincinnati, living in Cincinnati, that probably helped out, kind of formulating a marriage there in the middle of college. But I think Mr. Whisper had a really good question here in the YouTube chat. Like, we know Frank Pollock liked his quote unquote glass eaters, but what kind of players do you think Scott Peters is looking for? More athleticism comes to mind for me. Based off of what I've kind of heard from him, I do think that he does value measurables. He was very quick to point out the rare arm length and just overall size that both Orlando Brown Jr. and Amarius Mims have, and how like tackles. I'm gonna butcher the quote here. Tackles are not found, that they're born, and I think that was indicative of like those guys are like rare body types, and you need to prioritize them. Whereas with guards, like they can be. They can maybe come in all shapes and sizes. So I'm not sure it's necessarily the athleticism. I do think that he would value arm length, which makes me positive about Kandra a little bit. But I think that in order to play for Scott Peters' offensive line, you have to be extremely intelligent, because he'll throw you a bunch of different techniques and methods to better your game. And, scheme is obviously very much a part of that. And I think he's very scheme diverse. So being able to pick up on multiple concepts is also very indicative as well. So I think Kandra kind of fits the bill there. He definitely knows what he's doing. I don't think there's going to be a ton of work that Peters would need to do to kind of get his game up to speed. But the measurables still give me a little bit of pause. And if he does want someone who is kind of built in terms of more like the upper percentile of overall size and everything that comes with that, like that could be something, but we'll have to see, what guys that they're looking for and who they're interviewing, and maybe that'll tell us a little bit about what they're looking for.
Yeah, I like what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing. To use an old adage, it looked like he was a guy on some of those film clips that kind of had the head on a swivel, looking for contact, looking for the next defender to take out, which is always a coveted thing. So local guy, they haven't grabbed a ton of them, but I mean, they'll have as good of a scouting report as any on this kid. So I like what I'm seeing there. Could be really good value, like you said, early day 3 for the Bengals on that. And that's kind of, you'll see a run of interior offensive linemen usually around that spot anyway, because the tackles and that sort of thing usually go a little bit higher. But interesting player for sure.